Welcome back to Drawing 101. I'm Amy Jane and we are on lesson number 5. This lesson is all about negative space. What's negative space? Let me show you. When looking at the object that you want to draw, the negative space is the gaps between the objects. You want to start considering these shapes and what they create, but it's all the little parts that are around and surrounding the object. We talked about contour line, all those lines around the actual object, but we're now going to start to think about the shapes that are created by the space that surrounds the object. It's time to get set up. You want to find yourself a couple of objects, things that you can place near each other to create those wonderful negative spaces. If you can get set up with a light source, go ahead. It's always a great idea to keep thinking about form and light and shadow, but it's not necessary for this lesson. And then all we're using is our pencil, eraser, and paper. Any kind of paper you have is fine to use, but I want you to start to consider types of paper. I'm using a mixed media. There are all kinds of different papers for all kinds of different projects, but when using just a pencil and eraser, something that's just general, mixed media or sketch is always nice. Also grab a pencil sharpener. Now it's time to use that pause button. Get yourself set up and let's get to the drawing. Let's get started. I want you to start by taking just one of your items. Place it in front of you. Now you're going to draw just a square box, not too big. Now you're going to draw, thinking of the contour line of the object in front of you, but keep the shape very simple. Doesn't have to be completely accurate, but you want to look, study it. Once you get a nice shape laid in, I'll give you some time to do that. Kind of think about the structure, but it's not too important to get detailed here because all we're doing is exercising our eye, because the next step you're going to fill in the box. Just shade it in. Doesn't have to be very precise, but this is just to get you thinking about what it is to have space and a shape around the outside of your object. Sort of like coloring books, coloring in the lines. But by making this shaded in area, we're really starting to think about what it is that to create that shape surrounding our object. Take your time on this, use pause if you need to. Now take your second item. This is where the pencil sharpener also comes in handy. Keep a sharp pencil. I've chosen this Japanese toy, this kendama, with a ball and a string and a stick. It really is a nice and a cool shape. But again, I'm going to do it very quickly and just a sketch. There's a structure here. Whatever you have in front of you, you're going to just think about the general shape and the structure, but here we go again. We're to think about the outside, what's outside of that object. I've got a lot of little corners and crevices to fill in here. But whatever you're doing, just think about all those shapes that surround your object. Maybe your object is simple and you don't have too much to do here. Mine's a little more complicated. But there's a lot of intricate shapes. And this is we're gonna mix it up here in a minute. So just keep it simple for right now, just so you can get an idea about what it is to create the shape around. We're now going to do the same exercise, but with two items, placing one in front of the other. And it's going to get more complicated. But I'm thinking shapes. I'm looking. I now have two objects to think about. And I'm going to do the shading technique, same, just as we did before. And I'm not making it very detailed because it's more about when I consider what to shade, it's forcing me to consider the negative space, the space around it. You know, right here is where the cup passes in front of the kendama toy. Not too detailed, it's just more an exercise in looking and seeing. Now, after you've done your objects, again, use the pause button if you have to, because you might need a little bit more time. But we're gonna do it multiple times, and we're gonna just keep rearranging our objects. Now I need you to keep at this exercise. It is not the most exciting thing to do, but it will make you stretch and grow and improve your drawing so much. It's all about those relationships and being able to see and compare. You got this. Keep going. Thinking simply. And it's just about where you can see the shapes in between. The more complicated your object, the more complicated those spaces are. But keep looking constantly. Never stop looking at what you're drawing. Again, this is not about producing some kind of gorgeous drawing that everybody's going to look at. This is just your exercise. This is for you to be able to start to think and see differently. Whoopsie. And I'm going to rearrange them again and again. As you're continuing to do this and repeating this exercise, you're going to want to take a step back, look at the shapes that you're making, and look up at the objects and compare them. It really is helpful to see these. Once you've completed one square, you can see this simplified shape. It's just training to see something that's beyond just a plain old object, but it's an object sitting there in a space surrounding it. And I'm looking and I'm figuring out the relationships, as for example the relationship where the bottom of this, I forget the name of this, the bottom of the kendama, the bottom of the kendama toy and the bottom of that teacup. What is the relationship there? This time I put them very close, but not touching, not overlapping, and that's okay to do too. Here the kendama toy comes just close, but doesn't actually overlap the teacup. If after doing this a couple times you want to go grab some different kinds of objects, feel free, go right ahead. It's those spaces, those gaps, all those shapes in between. And coloring it in like this really lets you see. Just do it over and over again. Maybe don't make your squares too big, because then it'll take a lot more pencil lead to shade it in. This time I put the kendama toy right in front. Do want to think a little bit about the structure, but in a very loose and sketchy way. Now, having this teacup back here made it really challenging, but I'm thinking about, okay, where does the bottom of that teacup, and what is the shape? It actually goes like this. And then the teacup's sort of off-centered, but it comes out. Kendama toy, teacup relationship. And I'm noticing it doesn't, I don't think I have been that accurate here. As far as the sizing goes, I think this needs to be longer. I'm going to start that one over again. That's what you do I need more height on that. So just start a new one. Because the kendama toy, it made the teacup look real scrunched. And it was because I didn't get enough length. And see, this is the beauty of this. This is the beauty of this exercises. I never would have noticed that I needed to elongate the toy if the teacup hadn't been behind it. I never would have noticed that this teacup looks so scrunched and that this toy needed to be longer. So I start over. And I think the handle of that, I think about the size of the top and the handle. This is why it's so nice to do this exercise, because it really starts to train you. I think this needs to be wider, because my teacup comes right here and right about here. Think about the teacup behind there with the handle. And then I think about the space. And I'm just trying to capture the around object's space. What happens here? This is teacup coming up over the toy. That's kind of where I end up here. And then get that shading going, because that helps you to solidify what you're seeing in negative space shape, like just coloring it in. It's only by doing something and putting two things and having a relationship exist that you're going to see whether or not you've made it accurate. That one was challenging. Do one more. This time I put them really close. Almost. I even have a nice string here. I can think about what's happening with this string as well. That's so fun. I hope that you're really enjoying whatever objects you chose, and like I say, if you're wanting to do something different, go grab something different. You see how sometimes before I make it really filled in, I go back and I look and I see what's happening with the shape, and I sort of lay it in a little darker. It's sort of a combination of, really what it is the next step beyond contour line. And it's simple, it's very simple, but it's very helpful to think about not just the lines surrounding it, but the actual space, two things, and how they relate to each other. All about relationships. And just fill it in. So now that we've got all that exercise in, we're going to do an actual drawing. We're going to think about all the things that we've learned up to this point, about the lights and the shadows, the contour line, and now the negative space. Remember, these are machine objects, so I'm going to think about their structure. These were made in a factory by a machine. So structure is important. We're going to think about those relationships. We're going to kind of want to get some light marks in, trying to get accurate heights. But here comes the comparison, and here comes the structure of the second object. And I'm looking at the bottom of this and the bottom of my teacup, thinking about how far behind it goes behind. I may not have allowed myself enough space here. And here's where I'm teaching you. I'm looking at this thinking, I want a little more framing around it. So I'm going to start again. And because I made the lines really nice and light, we can just do that. And now that we have made that mistake and that error, it makes it so that I now know, I can see the light marks where I just erased, but I can now compare and know what I want to change. So I'm going to make everything just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to think, again, I'm going to go into the heart of the structure. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of ellipses. These are called ellipses. But these objects which have been crafted in a factory, and I'm thinking about that comes, see, I'm looking at this is the negative space here. And the relationship between the bottom of my object and the bottom of my second object. This is draftsmanship 101. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I really am going for accuracy here. I'm thinking about light and form and gravity. It's not really going to be an exact copy or an exact replica, and nor should it be. It's more about interpreting what you see. And I know these two sides need to be the same. There's this little lip. Now, as we draw, I am going to talk to you about different types of materials. Because doing a drawing like this could be really fun and interesting if you can acquire some charcoal. And in our next lessons, I'd like to start incorporating some different kinds of materials. I will show you. And if you can't and you don't have access to those kinds of materials, don't worry about it. I will always make it accessible to you so that you can do whatever it is you can do. Now that I feel good about my structure, I'm going to start to make some more solid, dark contour lines. Those light lines are so helpful in the beginning, just to lay in and get your shapes going. But now that I feel confident about my structure, I'm going to start to solidify and make them darker. Choosing your items, once you've done this, once you can go choose different items, because I really gave some thought to this and chose some really fun items. Once you've done it, you can then start to look around your house and think about what you would find to be interesting and fun. This kendama toy is so fun. So the beginning stages here are really just drafting in a light way, but constantly looking and comparing. I've got some tangent lines here, they call that, where this thing comes right up against. I might actually adjust, I might stray away a little bit from what I'm actually seeing. Just so that I don't get too many tangents. See, I want that cut. I want there to be an overlap there. And it ends up making my structure unsound. And I'm realizing that. And I'm adjusting, constantly adjusting. Because this ellipse has got to be something that reads as a round. That was made, the kendama toy was made so that the ball could go in there, sit in there. This is where I'm looking at the contour line, because just the outer bit of the teacup. So I see the contour, I see how the little part that's the handle of the teacup comes down. And then remember from our previous lesson, we've got shadows to consider. My shadows aren't too pronounced. If you're just doing it on a table in your kitchen or something, you may only just see light shadows, but we're thinking about that. And I see a definite shadow coming off this cup that's sort of, and I'm looking at the relationship of where the shadow passes of the cup. It passes behind the kadomatoi. Back here it sort of goes off onto the table. And I just want to give an indication of that. Pick and choose what's more important in your eyes. The kadomatoi is casting a shadow onto the cup. Now here's where the charcoal, we're going to talk about it, but the charcoal can really get going quickly to lay in. Your pencil you sometimes have to scrub and rub, but charcoals can be really helpful in just laying in. That shadow right there is where the kadomatoi actually, and here I'm thinking about this negative space, all that's going on behind there. I actually see some shadows behind there, but I may choose not to represent those, because really you do have to pick and choose what you find to be important. The more time you spend too, the more lovely and the more choices that you make. If you don't have too much time, that's okay too, but really spending some time to look and see. And I really want you to pause and work on this even after we're done talking and our lesson is over. I'm using all of the tools that we've been studying up to this point. I'm looking at those lights, I'm looking at those shadows, I'm adjusting, I'm looking at relationships. I'm noticing that the toy that comes down here has to match up over there, and I'm thinking about the structure of it. All I see is the outside of it, and it sort of is on an angle. And there's a lot of shadows and cool things happening where the ball on the top is casting a shadow. It's much darker here. These contour lines that I'm producing down here are much darker. And there's a big thing happening here. And this is where it's really going to start to get nice and lovely. All of the little places in there where the kadomatoi comes in front of the teacup, then the teacup goes back behind there. That's where your realism really starts to come into play. It's in those intersections and see this negative shape here is so nice. There's a shadow coming down, but then the light hits it again. So there's light here, there's shadows coming off of here. And I'm just representing. And now I want to express to you again, I move quickly. I have been doing this for so long. I want you to really take your time. Don't move as quick as I am until you've done it for 100 years. But you're going to notice that you're going to need to practice a lot more than what you see, what I'm doing here. Yours is going to take a lot more time. Look, this is a real nice, lovely negative shape here. I'm noticing there's just this tiniest little slit in between. Need to sharpen. And I don't want you to get too upset if this isn't looking right. Get your eraser out. Keep adjusting. Keep working at it. It will take work. But I love this little area, and this is what the whole lesson for today is all about. This tiny little slice of space, and right in between where the ball rests. I even see a little there's some light poking through, even right there a little. Not easy to represent that in a pencil drawing, but think about your shadows. Think about the spaces. This ball is just like the egg. So if you have your items maybe more complex, but if you can see where how the light hits them from our previous lesson, it'll help some form. You know, this is a lot like the egg, and you can find those egg-like shapes within your object. Think about remembering the core shadow. We have the light mass, the core shadow, the reflected light and the shadow mass underneath the ball, and the cast shadow, which in this case, it's just casting a shadow right onto the top of the toy. The darkest part, the pitch shadow under here, where it hits the table. Oh, I can't forget my string either. My string's coming down. This is going to be difficult to represent. And the string, this is where contour line comes in, because the string is, as it goes around here, it can be darker underneath. It's got a, underneath the string can make a darker line. We can just actually represent it with a line, lighter and darker in some places. An indication even. Sometimes just hinting to what's there lets the viewer's eye do the rest. All this under here is much darker. You choose what you want to represent. Remember, not just copying it, even though we're working on an accurate way to portray, but in the end, it is your choice how to interpret what you see. Maybe you find that, you know, some shadows and some things just aren't as important to you. There's a lot of reflection on this shiny cup happening that, you know, I may not want to actually consider. And when it comes out to the end of this, I'm looking at the negative space, but that I think can be well represented just by a contour line. You can see here how the culmination of all the lessons that we've done and all the things we've learned can come together to make a really nice and lovely drawing. Keep going, keep at it. These exercises are struggling. Keep drawing, keep having fun. Stretch and see and do and must have fun. You just need to stretch. It's a little uncomfortable at first. Remember, practice, practice. It just takes so much practice, but keep at it. Get past that initial struggle. You will see that things will open up to you. Keep drawing.